Good morning, world history. Great to have everybody. Thank you for logging in to today's lesson on a Tuesday. Hopefully you enjoyed your weekend. And today we're going to do a screencast lecture on democracy in Eastern Europe. And so, as we've been doing on these screencast lectures, you want to put your these topics on the left side of the paper and your Cornell notes on the right side. For each topic, you don't have to feel like you got to type down word for word everything Mr. Roper is saying. Just summarize it in your own words. So again, these topics go on the left side of your paper and the notes go on the right side. So what we're looking at today, we're beginning chapter 16. If you want to follow along in the book, this is chapter 16, lesson 1. And if you remember earlier in the semester, we studied the Cold War. Ooh, chilly, but it didn't have anything to do with the weather. You remember the United States was trying to spread democracy, and the Soviet Union was trying to spread communism. And so this week, the Cold War is going to come to an end. And so one of the first places where democracy is really going to spread is we're looking at the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. So the countries in Eastern Europe are essentially going to say democracy is good and communism is bad. So the first topic, Soviet control during the Cold War. So the Cold War is that period of time right after post-World War II from 1946. It lasts up until about 1990. And Eastern Europe was controlled by the Soviets. If you remember in one of your first online lessons, I gave you that video of Winston Churchill. Never, never, never quit. Winston Churchill going to the United States and saying an iron curtain had descended upon Europe, where Western Europe was democratic and Eastern Europe was communist. And then you had the creation of the Berlin Wall that divided Europe east and west. And so the Soviets had controlled Eastern Europe. You remember there were protests in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, and the Soviets had sent in troops. And so basically they set up puppet governments, and countries in Eastern Europe, they had to run their economy and they had to run their government the way that the Soviets told them. Well, that's going to begin to change. And it begins to change with our next topic, and that is Mikhail Gorbachev. You really ought to Google Gorbachev to get an image, to get a face behind the topic. Gorbachev was a very, very popular world figure in the 1980s. Anyone from my generation knows who Gorbachev is. Just like anyone from your generation knows who Putin is, Vladimir Putin, that would be the leader of Russia now. In the 80s, it was all about Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union, and then Ronald Reagan was a very famous president, and he was president in the 1980s. So Mikhail Gorbachev, he was elected leader of the Soviet Union at age 54, and he was the youngest leader since Stalin to be elected. And we remember how Stalin had ran the Soviet Union with secret police. He had jailed, executed many of his opponents. Well, Gorbachev's grandfather had been arrested during Stalin's reign and tortured. And Gorbachev's grandfather was one of the lucky ones that was released from prison. But he was tortured while he was there, and he told stories to his grandson. And Gorbachev never forgot this. He never forgot hearing the horrors and the stories of his grandfather under Stalin's reign. So Gorbachev becomes leader of the Soviet Union, and he's going to pass two very important policies. So that brings us to our next topic, Glasnost and Perestroika. So Glasnost. Glasnost was deemed a policy of openness. And so what this meant was under the Soviet Union now, the government was going to allow more freedom. So you could now actually criticize the government. Churches opened back up. Books were published. Reporters were able to investigate problems. Again, you could now criticize government officials. People were allowed more authority over their farms, their factories, small business. And perestroika was an economic policy that gave people, again, more control over business, more control over their farms. And so you now start having some capitalist principles seeping into the Soviet Union, and things are starting to open up. Again, you can now go to church, you can read a book that you like, you can criticize Gorbachev, you can criticize the government, and the people have more control over the economy. But Gorbachev is not just going to open things up to the Soviet Union. So let's talk about Gorbachev's foreign policy. That brings us to our next topic. We're moving right along. So Gorbachev is basically going to tell Eastern Europe, hey, it's on you now. It's your decision. Many of the economies of Eastern Europe were struggling under communism, and so Gorbachev's going to tell the countries in Eastern Europe they can now decide. They can now choose if they want to continue to be communist or if they want to switch to democracy, open up elections. But now countries in Eastern Europe are going to be free to make their own choice for government, and the Soviets will not stand in their way. Next topic, sidebar. Mr. Roper meets Gorbachev. Are you kidding me? I actually met Gorbachev. Many years later, after Gorbachev was retired, you'll learn on Thursday's lesson what actually ends up happening to poor Gorbachev. But in 2006, I met Gorby. And you're thinking to yourself, how did Mr. Roper meet Mikhail Gorbachev, one of the great leaders and famous leaders of our time of world history? It was really an accident. In 2006, I was in Kansas, where I went to college, participating in an alumni basketball game. That's where the older players play the current team. And in 2006, I was only 28 years old, so I was still young enough to get out and play against the college players. And Gorbachev happened to be on a speaking tour in the United States, and he was actually speaking at my college in the middle of Kansas on the same day that I happened to be there for the alumni game. So I went to see Gorbachev speak, then I went to play in the game, and later that night, my college teammates and I, old friends, we went out to a local eatery, and we're eating dinner, and all of a sudden, Russian security comes into the eatery, and there is Gorbachev. He said, "I want to be with the people," and Gorbachev came out to the eatery that night, and he walked around table to table greeting the people, and he actually sat down at my table, and I shook his hand. I'll never forget. He ordered an adult beverage. He ordered a gin and tonic, and he was at our table for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden, in his Russian accent, he said, "We go!" And the security escorted Gorbachev out of the building, and my college friends and I are looking around like, dude, that was Gorbachev. I can't believe it. That was Gorbachev in the building. And so that is a moment that I will never forget. Was in 2006 meeting Mikhail Gorbachev on alumni weekend, and it was a complete accident. Okay, the next topic: fall of the Berlin Wall. So the Berlin Wall had stood in Germany, dividing Germany east and west. Well, once Gorbachev opens things up in Eastern Europe, you can imagine a lot of people are hungry for democracy. So protesters start demonstrating for the right to travel freely. And eventually, the government decides we're going to open things up. And so I remember being this was in 1989, I was 12 years old, watching this on TV. This was like a concert. This was an event. People had these huge sledgehammers. They were knocking down the wall. People were drinking champagne, toasting this event. Like this was a huge deal. Can't imagine this happening in the age of social media and Twitter and Instagram and things like that. Rock bands came. People were playing music. People were celebrating, and the wall came down, and people could now travel freely in Europe. And so that brings us to our next topic, German reunification. Sorry about that. Germany reunifies. All right? It should say German reunification, but it says Germany reunification. Okay. Come on, Mr. Roper, get it together. So, as you can imagine, many people in Europe are fearful of a unified Germany. They're fearful that the Germans, they were major players in World War I, World War II, the Nazis, and people are nervous about, frankly, Germany trying to take over again. And so the leaders of Germany assure the world that they are committed to democracy, they're committed to human rights, and they're not trying to take over Europe again. And so Germany reunifies and becomes the third largest country in Europe, the largest country in Central Europe, and so we no longer have Eastern Germany and Western Germany. We now have Germany. And of course we know in 2011 the German Dirk Nowitzki takes down the big three, LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh. Has nothing to do with today's lesson, but just a little sidebar for all you hoop fans out there. Okay, Poland and Hungary. So after Gorbachev opens it up to Eastern Europe, Poland and Hungary, in these two countries, the economy is struggling. So you want to type down that both countries elect to get rid of communism and hold free elections. And so there will be free elections in Poland, and there will be free elections in Hungary, and there's democracy in Poland, and the Socialist Party takes over in Hungary based on the free elections. It was a peaceful transfer of power. Not so much in these next two countries. Czechoslovakia, October 28th, 1989, 10,000 people crowd in downtown Prague. That's the capital of Czechoslovakia. And police attack the demonstrators, injuring hundreds. Well, a month later, on November 24th, 500,000 people crowd the downtown, shouting, ole, 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 just celebrating, demanding democracy, demanding their rights, demanding free elections. And so the government resigns and democracy is in Czechoslovakia. Last place, Romania. Romania was controlled by a dictator by the name of Nicolae Ceausescu. And Ceausescu ruled Romania with an iron fist. Ceausescu, he was out of the playbook of Hitler and Stalin and Mao Zedong, where he had secret police to jail his opponents, execute his opponents, censored the media. You were not allowed to speak out against Ceausescu. Well, the people came out in 1989, just like in Czechoslovakia, and they protested. They protested Ceausescu. And so Ceausescu orders the army to fire on the demonstrators. Well, this actually backfires, and within days, the army joins the people. And so now, Ceausescu is on the run, him and his wife. They attempt to flee, but they're caught. And on Christmas Day, 1989, December 25th, 1989, Ceausescu and his wife are executed. And these Romanian revolutionaries take over cable TV, and they say, we have a special Christmas announcement. And they go out into this alley and they show Ceausescu's body. And the people of Romania celebrate the fall and death of this evil dictator. So there's now democracy in Romania. This is the story of how democracy spread through Eastern Europe. It all started with my man Mikhail Gorbachev, his policy of glasnost, perestroika, opening things up to the Soviet Union, opening things up to Eastern Europe. I met the guy. It was an epic moment in my life, and it was epic to lecture to you today. And I hope you enjoyed today's screencast. I hope you are doing well, being safe, washing your hands. There's a little more to today's lesson, so take a look for that. And I will post another lesson on Thursday. So you guys be well, you be safe, and take care.